All right, welcome to this edition of Morgan You Asked For. Busy night tonight in sports. One TV, I've got New York and Minnesota, the WNBA Finals. Back in Minnesota watching Bridget Carlton, former Cyclone. New York just took the lead 74-73 with a minute left, so it's all the way down to the wire there. And then obviously the Dodgers and Mets are on as well in the top of the sixth. So that game's going to go on for quite a bit more. So we'll keep you updated there. So I got both those on my TVs tonight. This episode here, I'm going to bring Trevor in just a second, is going to be very much Cyclone centered. Lots of things going on with Cyclone athletics and Cyclone football, and then both basketball teams. It's just never, I know in my lifetime, and very few schools, in fact, they're the only school, I'm a little surprised at that a little bit, that ranked in the top 10 in football and men's and women's basketball. All three teams are ranked in the top 10 this week, and it's AP. Obviously there's coaches polls, but this is the AP poll. Number 9 in football, number 5 in men's basketball, and number 8 in women's basketball. And then just a little bit more context, they are number 4 in cross country, which for those of you cross country fans, that's great. For those of us that just the three main sport, and then wrestling will be ranked top 10. Some say top 5. I'm just going to say they're going to be ranked, but that's not out yet. And again, they don't have an AP poll in wrestling. It's like the National Wrestling Coaches Association poll. So for the AP, 3 main sports, all ranked top 10, best it's ever been in Cyclone history, and can't get any more exciting than a home game, another night game. They're wearing blacks. Every game gets bigger and bigger. Is Central Florida the best team that we played so far? No. But is it the most important game we have? Absolutely. And we've talked about this week after week. The next game is the most important game. As long as you keep winning football games, every game gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be a team that's 0-7 or 8 or 9, whatever game you're on, or a team that's undefeated. It doesn't matter who it is. They just have to keep winning.
Yeah, things are good for Iowa State right now. That's a little bit of salt in the wound for Iowa fans. If Iowa could have won that Cyhawk game, Iowa State probably wouldn't be ranked in the top 10 right now. So yeah, a little bit more salt on that wound. But things are good for Iowa State. I thought that was an impressive win they got at West Virginia last week. That's a tough place to go at night on the road. That was a hostile crowd. Good for Iowa State. I think they keep getting wins this year that normally they wouldn't in the past. And as you said, now you got UCF coming in, back-to-back home games for Iowa State, which is nice. You get to spend some time not leaving Ames. And if they can get the win here, then that sets up Texas Tech down the road. But as you mentioned, got to take care of business versus UCF.
Yeah, it's back-to-back home games, but there is a bye week in there. So next week is a bye game. So this is a big week. Get through this week, get a win. Hopefully some of our linebackers and Dylan Barrett can get back after this week. And, some of those players that you kind of thought were out for several weeks that got hurt in camp, we're now at the point in the season where, say it was a high ankle sprain or a broken bone or something where it's 6 weeks till they're healthy. Well, now we're approaching week 8, 9, 10. So yeah, 6 weeks to get healthy and then 3 weeks to get ready to play. We're getting there now. So you're going to get some of those people back. And then also this is the time of year that those true freshmen that weren't quite ready in September, but have been practicing hard, getting better, been in the weight room, been in nutrition for, most of them got there this summer, starting to see. And if they're good enough, they can play them. And now we're getting to the point where you could still play them and redshirt still if needed, but you can test them out a little bit.
Yeah, if you're getting some of your players back from injury, that's big, especially for this final stretch. I look at Iowa State. They've taken 2 steps now out of 4, I'd call it. We know the beginning of the season woes that they've had in the past under Campbell. They got past that. If they can get this game, then I think they complete steps 2 of 4. And then you kind of get into that final stretch of the season. Can you finish undefeated, get to the Big 12 championship? This is just another step in that process. But I had the game on last Saturday, but there were so many good games on, I really couldn't focus on it. So I just wanted to kind of get some of your takeaways, the good and the bads of the game. I mean, obviously got the win, but besides the win, what were some things you liked or didn't like?
Well, to start the game, they got the ball and went right down the field and scored, running the ball essentially right down our throats. So it was like, oh my. And unfortunately, this has become a theme for Iowa State and a theme for John Haycock in general. And you look over the course, this isn't a this year only problem. Teams score, or teams definitely get movement and have a good drive the first or second drive of the game. Baylor scored 14 points right away. West Virginia scored, and then they had a chance. They missed a field goal, and that really changed the momentum of this game. They could have went up 10-0 because Iowa State missed a field goal on their first drive. And then West Virginia went down another good drive, missed a field goal, and then 2 plays later was a 60-yard pass to Jalen Knoll. And all of a sudden you got a tie ball game, and then Iowa State went from there. So the bad is a little bit of a slow start. Now we went down, we've had some issues with not having good first quarters on offense. Now this one we went down and we didn't get a touchdown, but we missed a field goal. So that's necessarily not all the offense's fault. Obviously, you want to score touchdowns, but at least had to put a good drive together. And I thought it was West Virginia's hard place to get to. It's a hard place to play. Quarterback, and we talked about this, Rocco Beck's dad was getting into the Hall of Fame. So not hard for him, but just different for him. His mom is from West Virginia. His grandparents were there at the game. His dad's from Philadelphia. Just went to school there, but met his mom there. So he's got West Virginia ties. Growing up, your mom and dad are West Virginia athletes. You think he wanted to play in West Virginia and he wanted to be in that crowd or, playing and having that crowd cheer for him? Absolutely he did. That's just human nature. And then him leading a rival team in, on the precipice of a top 10 team, undefeated. And he had a great game. No real mistakes. Just did what he needed to do. And Iowa State just went on a pretty good run there and then slowed her down. And then there was a, kind of a end of the game touchdown that they gave up that really didn't matter. So it made the score look a little bit closer than it was, but it wasn't really that close at all. Iowa State dominated that game. And what's happening is Iowa State is showing how good they are. And we've talked about it, and we'll continue to talk about it, how similar Campbell and Ferentz are. That once Iowa State gets a 2-score lead, it's just anaconda mode. Run the football, throw it a little bit. Don't have to go score 50 points. Get to 28, get to 30, hold them to 15, and win the football game. That's all you want to do. And Matt Campbell is doing that to perfection so far, and that's exactly what needs to happen Saturday night. Central Florida was kind of a dark horse for some people to get to the Big 12 championship game. Started off 3-0. Not been good since. KJ Jefferson is no longer playing. They've had 6 people leave the program in the last few weeks with the, epidemic going on in college football where you don't play your 4 games so you can still redshirt. Everybody leaves the programs. That's a discussion for a different podcast on whether that's good and bad or whatever. There's pros and cons, and for some people it's the perfect situation, and then for some it's not correct. But things don't look like they're going real well right now for Central Florida. So Iowa State needs to not let them get going. Start fast, bury them, and then cruise in the second half. That's what you'd love to see.
Yeah, for Central Florida, that was a team that you and I both didn't buy into the preseason rankings, and it looks like looks like we might have been right on that one at least. For Iowa State, assuming they get this win, and you talk about the slow starts, you wonder if a team like Texas Tech, what happens if Texas Tech gets up, 20-7 on Iowa State real quick, or maybe going into halftime, can Iowa State come back? So you hope that doesn't come back to bite them. I think Iowa State's got a little bit more juice to mount a comeback if that does happen than an Iowa team would. But so far, things are really looking good for Iowa State. Are you going to be up tailgating this week?
Yeah, so it's going to be kind of a hectic. Just kind of interrupt. Sabrina Nescu just hit a 3 with 1 second left to win the game for the Liberty. So the Liberty do win on a last second shot. I didn't see how Minnesota came back to tie it, but she hit a crossover 3 with 1 second left, and then they didn't get it back on the other end. So the Liberty do beat the Lynx and Bridget Carleton. Yes, I'm going to be there. We're going to go up. So I've only been to one game. How about that? With our Ryder Cup getting moved and Tyler having some soccer games, and we've got soccer this week too. So yeah, we're going to go up Friday. We're going to stay all night in the camper. Tyler, and then he's taking his friend Jaron, and we're going to go up, have a great time. And then Saturday morning, probably about 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock, we got to leave because Tyler has soccer at 1 o'clock in Pella. So we're going to go back to Pella. He's got to play soccer 1 to essentially 2:30. Then we're going to go right back up. So we'll be back up there about 4 o'clock by the time we get parked and everything. And then tailgate till 6:30. Go to the game, and then we'll stay all night again in the camper and go home Sunday to another soccer game.
Yeah, a lot of running around, but it'll be worth it. I mean, that's especially now the remaining home games. I mean, you got to get to as many as you can with Iowa State getting like they are.
Yeah, there's 4 home games left. Iowa State has 6 games left. They've got 4 home games. One essentially home game is going to be at Arrowhead against Kansas, and especially with Kansas. That looked to be an unbelievable game. It was going to be a great environment. Place was going to be sold out. It was going to be absolutely crazy. Excuse me, probably a lot of implications on the Big 12 championship race. And it still is going to have some, hopefully, as long as Iowa State keeps winning. But with Kansas being 1-5, they're not going to – I mean, it's going to be a very much a pro-Iowa State crowd, and it's going to be essentially a home game. So the only true road game Iowa State has left is at Utah, which we talked about before. And I know Utah's not having the season that we thought they were going to, but that's still going to be one heck of a challenge. Never played at Utah before as a conference. We played Utah, and we've been out there. I remember going out there. I think we gave up 70 points. I remember, and they came to our place. I think we had a home-and-home series with them when they weren't even in the Pac-12 yet, or maybe scheduled it when they weren't in the Pac-12, then they got in the Pac-12. But we played out there before, but not as a conference opponent. And they're going to, want to hopefully stay in the race if they can win a few games up to that game, whatever, ruin Iowa State chances or put a dent in them. I mean, if that's Iowa State's first loss, then that really doesn't change a whole lot, just except for maybe you have to win out. But
yeah, I'm downtown.
And then back home to Kansas State, which is obviously, I think that game's gonna be the whole kit and caboodle.
I'm about a mile from Utah, the Ute Stadium right now. So
all right, so you're in Salt Lake.
I'm in Salt Lake. I'd like to get back for that game. That should be a good one. It's going to be a tough road test for them, playing in altitude, going out west. Iowa State's traveled out west before to Colorado, way back in the day, but these current players, they don't have a ton of experience doing that. So regardless of what Utah's record is for that game, it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, it's by far and away their toughest game coming up. But as I said in my opening, monologue or statement there, every game is super important, and every game is the most important game. There's no question about it. Each week, more and more people are talking about Iowa State. You're going to get more Dan Patrick talk. You're going to get more Pat McAfee talk. You're going to get more Barstool talk. You're going to get more Colin Cowherd talk. Joe Klatt. Just every game day is going to spend a little bit more time on each week. That's what you want. You want that I-State. You can make fun of the logo all you want, and I don't think it's the best logo around. It could be better. The Walking Sigh or one of the other ones is better, but that's the logo we have, and you want to see that logo as much as you can. You want to see Iowa State flags in behind game day. You want to see them talk about them for 5 or 10 minutes, or maybe have a story on them, and that's what's going to happen if they continue to win games. And then coming up here in a few weeks, the playoff show is going to start, and Iowa State's going to be on that. They're going to be talked about for several minutes because they're going to, And Iowa State's everywhere on the map. If you look at playoff predictors, anywhere from the 3-4 seed winning the Big 12 to being the 12 seed, being the last seed in 11 seed, or missing out altogether if they lose a game or two. And that's what makes this crazy. And every game's super important. But just the more people talk, the better.
Yeah, you want to see Iowa State's logo all over, like you said, College game day. I've got 2 questions for you here. I already looked ahead to the Texas Tech game to see if there's a chance game day could come to Ames. But look, I think Ohio State plays at Penn State that week.
Yep.
So that's going to be a tough one to get game day at. And then second, let's say Iowa State runs the table but loses in the Big 12 championship and Iowa wins out. Is there any chance Iowa could come to Jack Trice for an opening round playoff game?
Yes, but realistically, no. And so I'll answer the first one. Game day is not going to come, but I do think there's a chance that Big Noon, the Fox one, could come there to Texas Tech, Iowa State. So that definitely could be an 11 o'clock game with the big guys from Fox being there. That's what I've heard on channels and people I listen to. Game day's out because of, like you said, Penn State, Ohio State, I think, is that week. So that's probably there. Iowa State. Yes, if Iowa State loses and has 1 loss, maybe even 2, especially if they have 2, they're going to be, unless they have 2 and then win the Big 12 championship game, they're in. If they have 2 losses, they're not going to have a home game. And then there is a chance if they would have 1 loss that they still wouldn't be in that top 4 because Boise State's in a precarious situation. If they run the table as well, their 1 loss is 3 points on the road at Oregon. And if Oregon would happen to go win the Big Ten and be undefeated, Boise State could jump a lot of people and be that 4th best conference champion and jump Iowa State. Because Iowa State just doesn't matter. They could, if they lose a game, there's no way that they're going to have a better resume than Boise State if Boise State wins out. Because they can't match, or as long as Oregon keeps winning. If Oregon loses a couple games, then that changes it. But if Oregon stays at number 2 or can jump to number 1 in the country, and Boise State's only loss is on the road there at 3 points, that's tough to beat for anybody. Ohio State lost by more than 3 points to Oregon.
Yeah, and Boise State's got the, in my opinion, the Heisman frontrunner in Ashton Jeanty. So that's going to help their case too if they were to win out, and then Oregon goes, like you says, and wins the Big Ten undefeated. So it's going to be fun. Is it a couple, 2 or 3 weeks before they start doing the?
I think it's election night. Is the first one.
Good. I'll actually have something to watch.
Yeah, so we'll watch that instead of course, it's no different than it's politics. It's the same thing. It really is.
Politics I like, though.
Yeah. But to answer your question a little bit more, Iowa traveling to Iowa State, I would say yes. It depends. If Iowa State only has 1 loss, they just lose. And I think they need BYU to be undefeated and both being 12-0, and then they lose in a close one to get that 5 through 9, right? 5 through 8, 5 through 9.
5 through 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah.
Yeah, 5 through 8 for the home games. And I'll be honest, that is best case scenario, and I don't care who comes. But Iowa would, I think Iowa's in a precarious situation as well. They got 2 losses, but only 1 loss in the Big Ten. If they continue to win, they're going to be favored in every game. And they only have 1 loss. And let's just say Oregon runs the table and Ohio State runs the table. They're going to go. Iowa's sitting at 3 or 4 in the conference, depending on what Penn State does as well. And they want Iowa State to do well. They're going to have a 1-point loss to a 12-1 Iowa State team. That's a good loss. I'm not going to put it past Iowa State to host Iowa. And you look at it is a TV show. We've talked about this. That's one heck of a TV show.
It's a heck of a TV show for the state of Iowa. I just wonder
Right.
if the committee, if they would just pass up on it because it would be too much of just the state of Iowa and not nationwide. But yeah, that would you talk about an all-time game right there. That rivalry, just to begin with, is intense enough. And if it was a playoff implication, that'd be something special. But both teams have a lot of work to do.
I mean,
I'm sure we can kind of get into Iowa now.
Yeah, Iowa with a nice win did exactly what they needed to do, and they just need to keep doing that each week. They've got their 2 losses. They lost the coin flip game to Iowa State, and it really was a coin. I mean, Iowa State made a heck of a play at the end of the game to win it with a kick, and the whole drive there. It truly was a coin flip game. We both thought it was. I think Vegas thought it was. I mean, it was exact. Iowa State won the coin flip. That's all it was. And then they lost to Ohio State. Now, I think a lot of people wish it was closer, but they went out. They go 10-2, 1 loss in the Big Ten. Absolutely, they're definitely in the conversation for the playoff. And I know Hawk fans around are they're losing their minds a little bit, but it's not so bad. It's just the quarterback play is just holding them back, and and you're a Hawkeye fan, and our buddies Zach and Brett and Mike and all of them and Tassel are all Hawkeye fans, and just losing your minds with quarterback play. If you just had a quarterback, how much better you'd be. And I agree. But we've seen this before. It's Kirk Ferentz's one position on the football team he can't figure out.
Yeah, and if you look at Cade's stats from this past weekend, he had a couple touchdowns, but those didn't come till late. As I text you, it's a good win, get back on the winning track, hopefully get a winning streak going here in the Big Ten play. But I didn't learn anything about Iowa. I don't think any Iowa fan learned anything new that we didn't already know. Special teams played really good. The running game's elite. Defense is still good. We're still getting out some chunk plays we wish we didn't. Had a nice special teams return. But the real question is can Cade and the offense pass the ball when they have to, when they're down 10 points going into a fourth quarter, or they get the ball back, down 4 with 1:40 left in the timeout? Can Cade lead the team down the field throwing the ball? And I have real questions. I have real doubts about that.
Yeah, if it comes down to him making a play for you to win the football game, there's no confidence in there. And I can't disagree with that. I wouldn't have any either. And it's tough. It's got to be tough as a Hawkeye fan, and it's tough as a football fan and fan. I'm not a Hawkeye fan, but I don't hate them, and I pay attention to them. But going and watching Petrus have some success. Yes, they're not winning a lot of games, but he's throwing the football over the yard. He's throwing touchdowns. Yes, he has some interceptions, but seeing him have that ability, and Joey Labus, again, they're not winning a lot of games at Central Michigan and stuff, but they're throwing for a lot of yards. They're throwing touchdowns. They have the ability, but for whatever reason, the offense at Iowa just limits them so much, or just I don't know what it is. It can't be that much. I mean, it's coaching, but I think it's just the whole offense in general just doesn't allow them to just go make plays.
It's a disease or something.
Right.
I mean,
it's contagious.
It's tough. It really is tough. But they got Michigan State this week. That'll be a tough road test. We did our power rankings. So anyone that doesn't know, Michigan State will always be last for me.
Yep.
I'll always have them ranked last. I don't care if they go undefeated and win the national championship. Michigan State's always last. I hate Michigan State. That's before even the Big Ten championship in 2015. I can't stand Michigan State. Minnesota I don't really like either, but they're just kind of Minnesota's just little Minnesota. They're just kind of the cute little team that wants to be there, rowing the boat and all that. So sometimes I'll give Minnesota some credit when they deserve it, but Michigan State I can't. I hate Michigan State, and I'd love for Iowa to go put 40 on them.
Do you think Iowa's in a situation now where they do feel that if they get in the situation we talked about with Iowa State, that they're like Ferentz and Iowa, you get the lead, put the Anaconda hold on, and just win the game. Doesn't matter. I think Iowa might be in a little different situation where does Tim Lester and the coaching staff have to have this conversation a little bit? Hey, if we are in the position to go score 40 and win by 20 instead of 10, do we push the pedal to the metal a little bit more to show the committee that we are good enough to get an at-large if we win the football games? Do you think that is discussed at all in that Iowa coaching meeting room?
I hope it is, and I hope Tim Lester pushes for that, not only to make our resume look better, but also to prove to the offense that we can go score points when we need to. Give them confidence. That way, when we do get down later in the year versus Nebraska or someone, like I said, we're trailing by 10 going into the fourth, the offense has some confidence, like, hey, we can go score points. So for both those reasons, I hope they keep the foot on the throat if they have it there.
Yeah, I just think Iowa's in a position where you've got to get some style points. You hope Ohio State doesn't lose another game. You hope Iowa State goes undefeated. Those help your resume, and that's stuff that's out of your control. But the stuff that you can control, obviously you just want to win. But if you have a chance to score a touchdown late, I think you have to do it, and I think you have to try to do it.
Yeah, it's not like they have to go put up 60 or 70 on them, 60-7 or something like that. But if you have a chance, if you're up 17 points with 7 or 8 minutes left, stay aggressive. I mean, you can run out the clock like Iowa typically does, but if you have a chance to go score another touchdown or two, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think they should. Their playoff chances are dim, but it's not extinguished at all. And I think you have to, with the 12-team playoff, as much as people like it or hate it, whatever, it does keep so many more teams' attention. Iowa, if it was a 14 playoff, Iowa's out. That's not even a conversation. It's whether you can get to the Big Ten championship game, whether you want to get to the Big Ten championship game and play Ohio State or Oregon, or do you want to just get that New Year's Six game, whatever. I don't even know what the configuration of all the bowls and everything is this year. And the conversation's different, which I want to make a note of this, kind of going back to Iowa State, but I think this is college football in general. And I've heard him say this again, but I kind of forgot. And he kind of said that in his they have a coach's show every Monday, just like everybody. And Jamie Pollard's the first half of the show, most of the time, not all the time, but this week he was. And he talked about the situations of the playoff versus bowl games. Like when you go to a bowl game, you go there for a week, you go have a party, you have all kinds of stuff for your fans, and it's just a party for a week. It's a celebration of the season, which you still have. You don't have all of them, but you still have the Houston Bowl and the Alamo Bowl and all those games. So the teams that get third or fourth or fifth in their conference, whatever, especially in the Big 12, at most you're going to get 2 in. So let's just say, for the sake of this argument, Iowa State and BYU get in the playoff. Third team ends up being Kansas State. So they're third, and they get to go to the Alamo Bowl. They go to San Antonio for a week. It's fun. You have all kinds of celebrations and everything else like this. Well, let's just say, for this argument's sake, Iowa State gets a home game as the number 5 seed. So they're going to play December 20th, 21st, whatever day, doesn't matter. Obviously, it's a home game, so nothing changes. It's just a home game. Let's say they win that football game. They're going to go to one of the games. Let's just say I think it's a Fiesta Bowl is one of the options. They go play Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl. Jamie Pollard said it is because you don't know. If you win, you got to keep playing. So you can't have a party. He goes, it's going to be a 2-day trip for the first one, for the quarterfinal. It's essentially just like a regular road trip. You go down a day, depending on where it's at. If you go to the Cotton Bowl, probably just say you play on Saturday, you go down Friday and be truly just like a road trip. If you play in Fiesta Bowl where you're going west time zone, you might go a day earlier. But it's just a road trip. You're not having all the parties and everything because it might not be over. And then you get to the semifinal, and then he said it's a 3 or 4 day trip, depending on where you're going. And then if you get to the finals, then he goes, then it's a party. But he goes, that's a lot. And then the other thing is, like he said, you can be done December 20th, which is before almost all the bowl games have been in the past. All of a sudden, you lose, you're done. There's no party. The season's over. You don't have anything. And he goes, there's going to be a lot of fans of teams They're just going to be done and just going to be, he goes, especially on those, 9, 10, 11, 12, where they're on the road. Let's just say, for the sake of this, Alabama, with their I don't think, unless they would go win the SEC, let's just say they get the number 10 seed in this with their loss to Vanderbilt. They're not getting the benefit of the doubt now, I don't think. They go on the road and play. Let's just say they come up to Iowa State, Ames, and lose. They're done. And I think people don't understand how fast it's going to be, and the fan bases aren't going to understand how fast it just ends. And I just thought that was a good point of view, and to kind of warn Iowa State fans for that.
Yeah, it's going to be quick. For, like you said, you lose, you're done. You're not going to a bowl game in a few weeks,
right? Yep.
Like you typically would. But I will say this: if Iowa State was to get the 5 seed, for example, that extra home game, that's worth everything. Tickets,
it is, and we would make one heck of a party Friday. Let's just say they play Saturday. We would make one heck of a party in Haunted Forest and the RV Village, and everybody there that has. Now, the thing is, it's cold, so everybody's RV and everything is going to be in storage, so it's going to be a lot of tents, or your campers are going to be running. I mean, it's going to be different because it's going to be December 20th that we're not used to having a home game. But we'll make the best of it, and it doesn't matter what the weather is. It will be one big party. But it's not, I've been to several bowl games. Like, I went to Memphis last year. I've been to Memphis before. Went to San Antonio. I've been to Phoenix. I've been to Boise. I mean, I went to 3 bowl games when I was in college, and it was a party every time. And it's just, he just was warning people that it's not a party until you get to the championship game. Then it's the week-long, obviously the team does all their stuff, but that's when you're going to have the parties. But everything else is, you can't have all the parties, and you don't want to have all the parties because your season's not over. When you play in the Alamo Bowl, that's it. Doesn't matter. Win, lose, draw. It's over. You're playing in the quarterfinals. You hope it's not over, and you don't want to have all the parties and put everybody's, pat everybody on the back and pat the coach on the back and the players, because you don't want it to be over.
Yeah, it'll be different for the teams and players because you want to keep moving on. For the fans, though, it's going to be awesome. Especially, I mean, like you said, if Iowa State was a 5 seed and they're hosting LSU, I mean, LSU doesn't want to come north. That would be amazing if that was to happen.
Yeah, that, and like an LSU going to Notre Dame and it being snow on the field, and it's not going to happen this year, but LSU going to Michigan where it's cold and rainy and sleet, and or Iowa City or just one of these Penn State. Penn State looks like they're definitely one of those that definitely hosting a home game. You give them a Saturday night game, white out in Happy Valley with Georgia coming to town or LSU or Alabama. Holy smokes. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, that is. And that's I think that's like December 20th weekend, your birthday weekend, right? We talked about
it's my birthday weekend. That's what I was with my dad last night. Paige had a choir concert, and there was some talk about, when we're doing Christmas and just things that are happening and stuff. And I just said, hey, that weekend is, if Iowa State is playing somewhere that weekend, we're going. Whether it's obviously it's in Ames, it's going to be super easy. You've got season tickets. We'll have our tickets and everything else like that. And the other thing is, Jamie Pollard said, if Iowa State does host a playoff game, not everybody's getting tickets and not everybody's going to be sitting in their seats either, because they have to, obviously they have the band for the other team and the visiting team just like normal. But he goes, there is some corporate people that are coming to playoffs that aren't normally there. So in Iowa State's case, I assume everybody that has a season ticket would get to have theirs, but those of you that kind of buy tickets every game or maybe buy the 3-game package or anything else like that, they might not get tickets. So hope I'm in it. I don't give a lot of money, but I do give some money, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting finish, and I'm looking forward to it. It's crazy that we're basically halfway through the regular season already, and there's been some big games. I know we're going to get into Ohio State here as well.
Yeah, just a couple things. Iowa State's 6-0, first time since 1938. 7-0, same thing. 1938, they started 7-0 and then finished 7-1-1. So nothing really changes here. But 1938, Snow White was the leading movie, and Adolf Hitler was starting to take over Europe and everything else like that, which we've had this conversation that Hitler's just an interesting guy at how he rose to fame. And we've had this conversation in our groups, and you've been with us and everything, and how Hitler as a leader, and obviously he was a horrible person, but as a leader, I've heard this talked about more, especially since 1938 was coming up, that Hitler being a leader and how that came to happen and everything is just, it's an interesting thing. And I think there's a couple books, a couple guys are talking about just on how charismatic and how we got people to follow him and stuff. And so it's just weird that things that we talk about in our group are talked about other places. So we're not so much different.
Yeah, our weird little conversations are going on elsewhere, thankfully.
Yep. Let's move on to Ohio State, Oregon. Obviously, game of the year so far, I think. Alabama, Georgia was, but with Alabama losing that next week to Vanderbilt, I think it took a lot of shine off that game and what that really meant. If that happens with Oregon and Ohio State, with them losing after this or whatever, it will as well. I don't think it is. I think Ohio State and Oregon are two of the best 3-4 teams in the country. I think Georgia is one of the 2 or 3 best 4 teams, best in the country as well. But what I found the most thing is just Will Howard, clock management, still comes and gets the best teams in the country. Clock management, it's just absolutely crazy at how teams cannot figure it out. And it drives fans nuts because, and I heard this, I think we might have talked about this, but why fans can't figure it out is because most fans play college football or NFL football on PlayStation or Xbox. So they actually do this for real. They do time management in those games and they can figure it out. But yet coaches that are paid $10 million a year can't figure it out.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that play the video games. They've got it figured out. And for me, our Big Ten power rankings, I did put Oregon first. If it wouldn't have been for the end of that game with the Will Howard, it was a Dak Prescott moment. I can't get that out of my mind. I would have ranked Ohio State first still because they were on the road. I think if they met on a neutral site. But that moment with Will Howard at the end of the game, as long as he's their quarterback until he proves otherwise, I can't see them hosting the national title because of him. He had the big eyes like Dak had in the playoffs last year. He got into a little bit of a shoving match after the game with some people, which, that stuff happens. But just I don't know if I could trust him in a big moment in a Final Four or championship game to come through. And I know it's just one moment. He's a young guy, but I'm going to have to see him do it for me to believe that Ohio State can win the national title with him at quarterback.
Yeah, he was good at Kansas State, but he wasn't great. And then I think there were 6 seconds left to start that play.
I forget exactly, but he took way too long. It was
he pump faked about 3 times and then took off running. That was a crazy part. It wasn't just that he took off running. I think that was the right play to try to get a few yards, but he kind of sat in the pocket and pumped it a couple times before he ran. He needed to run right away or chuck it out of bounds. That was your 2 options with 6 seconds left. Yeah,
it was a boneheaded play, and maybe he'll bounce back from it, I'm sure. But it's pretty harsh for me to judge him on that one play, but I can't help it. It's tough for me to imagine, like I said, them winning the national title with him at quarterback, making a boneheaded play like that. That's the reason I can't see Dak Prescott hosting up a Lombardi Trophy. But we'll get to the NFL in a little bit.
We'll get to the Cowboys here in a little bit. The kind of another big thing that came out today, and the guy I teach with and everything, Kyle Kramer, brought this up. He was looking on ESPN or whatever after school, brought this up, that the NCAA closes that loophole that Dan Lanning used to get some more time off the clock, running that 12th player on, knowing that 5-yard penalty, but the time, that time still escapes and Ohio State can't get that time back. Reminds me of, I think it was Belichick and Vrabel had that kind of same situation in the NFL several years ago, and then they changed the rule. The NCAA came out and closed that loophole where the offense is now going to have the choice of the 5-yard penalty and recouping the time in that situation. And then there's two different ways to do it. Like someone runs on, but if someone is trying to run off the field, then nothing changes because then they're not trying to play. And there's not trying, like if they actually are accidentally having the 12th man on there and then realizing it late and trying to run off, but very obvious that Oregon ran that person on purpose. And what it shows me that the NCAA that says they can't change rules, they can't do things, it's got to go to committee, it's got to get talked about. They all got to go spend nights at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Tampa, Florida for 4 days to figure stuff out. That's not true. When it happens to some of your big-time programs, when it happens to Ohio State, when it happens to Georgia, when it happens to Alabama, things can get changed. So it's all a farce. It's just absolutely nuts. They can change things when they want. And the NCAA is just a joke, absolute joke. When it happens to one of their big-time programs, they will jump in and save the day. The other thing that needs to be on the same trajectory is the faking injury rule that Ole Miss is doing. And I don't know, we've talked about this on here before, but the SEC Shorts is just all over that right now. If you watch those on YouTube, they're pretty good. And they are all over them. And the NCAA should be all over them because it's not close. They're not. Now, there is a different fine line there because some people do get hurt. But when they're running and they're looking at the sideline, then all of a sudden they just fall down. I saw one clip where the running back was like in formation and then all of a sudden just fell down. I think it was a linebacker. I guess he wasn't on offense. But just absolutely crazy. And Ole Miss is lying straight to our face saying they're not doing it on purpose.
Yeah, they're definitely lying. And, for the NCAA changing that rule right away, I'm almost surprised they didn't vacate the win from Oregon. They like to do that. So, I always like when the NCAA says we're vacating wins and we're taking the Heisman. No, you're not. The games took place. We watched them. We know who won the game. You're not going to vacate USC's wins. We watched the games. They were the best team. But no, as far as getting to the faking of the injuries, that is a problem that it does have to be changed. How exactly they're going to do that, I don't know. But it's very obvious when they just all of a sudden fall on the ground or they look at the sideline and then just take a knee. They're going to get something in place for that, and they need to.
And the reason it's happening is, especially when it's happening after a big 50-yard play or something, so they're trying to slow it down because Iowa State does that. They don't run fast usually, but if they have a big play, they run up to the ball and want to snap it again because they know the defense is a little bit winded. They found something or whatever, and they know that defense just isn't going to be ready to play. And it's gamesmanship, and it's using the rules to advantage. Now, I did hear this, and they were talking on the Morning Rush, Ross and Travis, great radio show in the morning out of Des Moines. They were talking, it was a loophole, but was it ethical? Because he knew he was breaking the rule, but he knew it would help his team. Do you have a problem with him doing that?
No, what Dan Lanning did, I have no problem with. Having your players faking injuries, to me, I guess some people might say they're the same. To me, they're different. But as far as what Dan Lanning did, I have no problem. And you almost wonder if he shouldn't even admitted to it because maybe the NCAA wouldn't have been quite as quick to act on it. Maybe he could have got away with it again. But as far as that goes, I really don't have a problem with it.
Right, and I don't either. But it's a fair question. That when you knowingly break the rules to your advantage, is that sportsmanship? Is that how the game's supposed to be played? I would say no. Like, that's not how it's supposed to be played. But then, and so Ross and Traven was kind of having this argument. But then Justin, who's their producer, a younger guy, 23, 24 years old, brought up in basketball, related to basketball, how at the end of a game, if you have a player that is not a good free throw shooter, that you foul on purpose. That's breaking a rule. You're not supposed to foul someone. And that's very much acceptable, and it's just part of basketball now. But it's the same idea. It's using the rules to your advantage to try to help your team win. It's using the rule by breaking a rule because you're not supposed to foul. That's the whole point of basketball is you're not supposed to. And I just thought that was a kind of a good correlation that you didn't think of if you didn't like the way that Dan Lanning or even Ole Miss is doing this. It's using the rules to your advantage, and that's the same, the hack a Shack or however, doesn't matter who you're fouling, but it's the same. It's on the same line as that.
There's all sorts of
long ways
in a football game or any sporting event. Fair. I mean, guys are constantly looking for signals. We saw that at Michigan. There's stuff that happens on the bottom of piles. Guys pinching, punching, doing whatever they're doing at the bottom of piles. You're not supposed to do that either. So this stuff all goes on in games. Deflate gate, taking the air pressure out of football to get it to where you want. There's all this stuff takes place. I mean, it's but the fake and the injury one, I do think that actually is a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and then the problem is when someone actually is hurt, and that does happen as well. So when all these rules, but then you got to have loopholes and you got to have examples where this isn't a penalty, but the NFL does that where they have, someone gets hurt in the last 2 minutes, there's still a 10-second runoff or whatever, or the clock stops depending on which way you're trying to do it. So even if it's a legit injury, it still stinks, or you have to call a timeout. If someone's hurt, I think that's what the NFL, maybe it is. They're forced to use a timeout if someone's hurt, and that way they have to be hurt because their coaching staff would not ever tell them to get hurt. But just in case they are, you still have to call a timeout when you don't want to. So there are ways around it, and I hope the NCAA will start enforcing that.
Yeah, maybe the NCAA could do something where each team gets one injury timeout. It can't be used, though, in the last 5 minutes of either half.
Right.
And then if a player does happen to get injured in those last 5 minutes of either half, maybe there is a clock runoff, some sort of a penalty, even if the guy actually is injured and can't get off the field. That's a tough one, too. But they'll come up with something.
Yeah, they'll figure it out. They'll go to some fancy resort and figure it out. I have no doubt in my mind. Anything else in college? Just a little bit more with basketball. I want to go to the men's basketball poll. 3 of the top 5, 5 of the top 10, and 7 of the top 25 are all in the Big 12. The Big 12 is the SEC in basketball. And it's going to be a fun run. Iowa State's going to be really, really good. But don't be shocked if Iowa State doesn't have as good a record as last year, just because of who they have to play. And that conference is insane. And they could finish 4th in the Big 12 and be a 2 seed, or maybe even a 1 seed, just depending on who you beat when, and maybe just have a couple losses that they're kind of mind-blowing. But to think that this team going to Maui, having Marquette at home, playing at Iowa, and then the 20-game Big 12 schedule is going to be 30-3 at the end of the year isn't realistic. And I don't want to set Cyclone fans up, and I don't think they are. Most Cyclone fans are pretty realistic, but I don't think some people understand how hard this conference is going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for them to have just as good or a better record than last year, especially as deep as the conference is. You mentioned it. They're definitely the SEC of college basketball, the Big 12 conference is. So it'll be just survival of the fittest, and all they need to do is obviously get in the tournament, be one of the top seeds, though, hopefully. Be a top 4 seed in the tournament, I think would be, you tell me, but I think that would be a good goal. Even if they're a 4 seed, that would still be pretty decent.
Right. You kind of set goals or expectations, and what you see as a success and what you see as a failure. And you do it with Iowa this year. You say the NCAA tournament is a success, and if they don't, it's not a huge failure if they're close, but making the tournament's a success. For Iowa State, it's very different. Obviously, it's preseason number 5, so you're one of the best teams in the country. You're supposed to be. Now, obviously, injuries and things happen where things can change in a hurry. But if your team stays healthy and plays well, I think in basketball and with Iowa State, it's a success if you make the Sweet 16. That's why, the Sweet 16 is kind of the bar. You can't expect to go to the Elite Eight. Haven't been to the Elite Eight since 2000. And then Final Four, just Iowa State's been there once in their history, and it was just long, long time ago. So you can't expect to go to the Final Four. And the NCAA tournament, we've seen it's all about matchups and things happen, and you have a cold shooting night, and it's just over. But I think the expectation should be the Sweet 16. And then when you get there, Iowa State's been to the Sweet 16 enough in the last 6, 7, 8 years that we do need to take the next step. But you can't expect it.
Yeah, unless you're like a Duke,
right?
Kansas, UNC,
yep.
then you can't expect to get to the Elite Eight, the Final Four. But for Iowa State, you're right. I mean, get to the Sweet 16, and as you said, take the next step. Hopefully, get to the Elite Eight. But yeah, whatever seed they end up being when they get in, when they do get in, as we know, anything can happen. It's a best of one series, and if they have a bad shooting night versus someone, they can go home. Or if they get in a hot streak, they could end up in the Final Four very easily.
Oh, and when you're a preseason number 5, there's some people that think you can win it. You don't just become number 5 for no reason. I mean, a couple things bounce your way, or Kansas gets 2 people hurt. I mean, something you're not even in control of, but all of a sudden they have 2 people hurt, they're out. An upset does happen in the NCAA tournament out of your bracket. So all of a sudden, now in the Sweet 16, you're playing a 12. You were a 3. Let's just say they're a 3 seed. Now all of a sudden you're playing a 12 seed or something like that, and it opens up for you. Things do happen that make it easier, so then the expectations change, but you can't count on that. And that's why the Sweet 16 should be the expectation, and then everything else is a bonus. But it shouldn't be a shock, and depending on how things happen, then maybe it should be an expectation.
Should be fun. It's not too far away. I think the Iowa women play in, 2 weeks from today. Yep. Maybe it's around there.
Iowa men play in 2 weeks as well, or Iowa State men.
Yeah, basketball season, it's coming fast, so we're getting toward that time of the year now.
All right, let's move on to the NFL. Kind of lots of news. Let's start with the trades that are happening and maybe some more potential trades that could happen. Trade deadline is also Election Day, I believe.
I think it's right around there. We saw Devontae Adams got traded, Amari Cooper to the Bills, which I think was a good move. You look at the Lions, Aiden Hutchinson injury. We're going to get into that game specifically here after this, but some Max Crosby's coming up. That's going to cost a pretty penny for Detroit if they make that move. Myles Garrett. You look at the bad teams are probably going to be sellers. You look at the Tennessee Titans, Arden Key and Harold Landry could be a couple guys that maybe Detroit could look to bring in. But as far as Detroit goes, everyone expects them to make a big move. I don't necessarily know if they will. And you're not going to find another Aiden Hutchinson out there right now, unless you were to get Myles Garrett. But that's going to be very unlikely and a high price to pay for that. So I trust the Lions, though, the way they've drafted the last 3 years, Brad Holt, or who they've got in management. So they're not going to be able to reproduce Aiden Hutchinson, but the players on the team, I just trust them to figure it out, whether they do a rotation of guys. I trust Detroit to figure this out. I don't think it's going to be a season killer like some people are expecting.
Hey, this goes out to Joe Getkin. He just said way too early Iowa State score prediction for men's basketball. 80-72 Iowa State. There's my way too early. Now, I do reserve the right to change when it gets closer in December.
I don't know much about either men's team. If I remember right, Iowa State they weren't a high-scoring team last year, right?
No. But they're going to run up a little bit more, run up and down more a little bit. It's going to be in Iowa City this year, so they're going to play a little bit more at Iowa's pace.
Let's go 79-74.
Okay, so we're both pretty close.
Iowa State, yeah.
There you go, Joe. All right, kind of going back to the NFL. Yeah, Hutchinson, you can't replace him. And then the other one that I heard was interesting. Obviously with the Chiefs with Rice being hurt, and that injury is bad. It's not just a regular knee injury; it's pretty bad. He's going to be out for a year, and then when he does get healthy, he's probably going to have a 4-game suspension for what happened this last summer. So he's not going to play until the end of next year at the earliest, because his suspension cannot start until he's on the active roster. So that's kind of a weird situation. And it's not finalized, but just history says he's going to have a 4-game suspension. So are the Chiefs going to try to go get a receiver? Probably. But they need a receiver that's probably signed through the end of this year and next year at least, because they're going to need him for a year and a half. They can't just have him for this year, because he's not going to be with them next year either.
Yeah, for the Chiefs, they're in a tough spot. I mean, you look at some of the receivers out there, Cooper Kupp maybe, but he's injury prone. Christian Kirk of the Jaguars might be another guy that they could look at. George Pickens is unhappy, but he's always unhappy, and they're on a winning team. For the Chiefs, though, I think they almost need help with the tackle position more than receiver, even though the media doesn't really want to talk about that because offensive tackle is boring. I think most Chiefs fans would admit their tackle play has not been very good this year. And, they brought in Juju and Kareem Hunt, and those guys hadn't been doing anything. Juju got cut from the Patriots, comes in, has a big game. So they just make it work. But the problem with trying to find an offensive tackle is nobody wants to give one up because they're so hard. It's so hard to get a good offensive tackle that once you have one, you don't want to let them go. Receivers, there's so many good receivers in the league that teams are willing to let go of a guy, a second or a third stringer, just because you could find somebody in the draft. So, yeah, there's going to be some more movement. We've got a couple more weeks of trades that are going to happen. Look for the teams that are bad to start selling, the Jags, the Raiders, Patriots. I don't know who the Patriots could really give away at this point as far as offensive skill position players go. But, yeah, the bad teams will start selling, and those teams that are trying to buy for the playoffs or even a Super Bowl are probably going to be buyers.
And then let's get to the Lions and Cowboys game. Just an absolute beating the Lions put on the Cowboys. The Cowboys have not won a home game this year, which is funny. I hate the Cowboys. You hate the Cowboys. I laugh. Jerry Jones is attacking radio people or whoever he's attacking down there. But the Cowboys are just in shambles. They paid Dak all this money. They are stuck. McCarthy, I thought he's going to be fired the last 2 seasons. He's still there. Got to be gone after this year, you would think. But just brings a smile to my face, but Cowboys are in disarray.
As I text you, it was a great day for America Sunday to watch the Cowboys go down like that. If anybody who's not a Cowboys fan enjoyed it, we talked about some of the issues with the Cowboys coming in this year was the no running game, at least on paper, and the lack of weapons out of CeeDee Lamb. Those are coming true. And then their defense is a whole nother story. So, yeah, Dallas is in trouble. You look at Detroit, though. Detroit can pound the ball with Montgomery at you. They've got Gibbs, who's the more shifty player. Amon-Ra St. Brown's one of the best get a first down guys in the league. Jamison Williams is coming alive now. He's a real threat to take the top off the defense kind of player. And probably one of the more underrated signings before the season was wide receiver Tim Patrick. He was here in Denver. He had back-to-back seasons of season-ending injuries. He was a good receiver years ago. He looked good in preseason. I was pretty surprised when the Broncos cut him, and he's really coming alive for them as a number 3 receiver. And you look at all the different ways they can beat you. They've got the best O-line in football. Sam Laporta, kind of a feather in my cap. I've been saying for a couple of years that Goff is better than Dak. It's just one game, but that gives me a little bit of a W right there on that one. And then not only can Detroit be in all those different ways, they're running multiple trick plays every game. So this one was a little bit exaggerated because they wanted to get some revenge on the refs and the Cowboys, but the Lions, they can attack you all these different layers, running game, receivers, possession, trick plays. I mean, they have to be the toughest offense to plan for, and they go for it on 4th down all the time.
I was watching the game a little bit, and the announcers were talking that Ben Johnson must have all kinds of, trick plays or anything because they're running trick plays up 30, and you don't want to show these to other teams. You've got this game in the bag. But again, I think your point was they wanted to show the Cowboys, the refs, the NFL, show them up a little bit, and they did. But they made a good point that you don't want to show all this stuff because you may need that stuff, and that's part of your game plan. And I'm guessing he's got trick plays off of trick plays that he wants the Bears and the Vikings and the Packers to practice. and then he's going to have a little, jet off of that, and going to make those teams look crazy.
Yeah, typically in football, you'd have about 2 trick plays, and you might run one in the regular season and then one in the playoffs. Break in case of emergency type play. I think Ben Johnson, obviously, he's doing this on purpose. He wants it to be a part of their offense. We're just going to run a trick play or 2 every game, and you have to be ready for it. It's just going to keep the defense guessing. I think that's part of their game plan, which it's a new school way of thinking.
Yeah, he's fun to, and then obviously Dan Campbell. They made a big deal. He played for the Cowboys. He's from Texas, went to Texas A&M, and he goes for it on 4th down. So he gives Ben Johnson. There's a lot of times where Ben Johnson knows he's got 4 downs, and when you're in that situation, you do call things different. As a former coach that called plays and everything, if you know you're going to go for it, the head coach, says, "Hey, you got 4 downs, or you got 2 downs here on 3rd and 1," you call different. If you need to get that on 3rd and 1, you're probably running it. But if you've got 2 plays, you can run something that's going to get you a big chunk, hopefully come back on 4th down and then get it. So they're all in. They're really good. And then kind of continuing with the Lions, and then just the NFC in general, NFC North in general, all 4 teams look pretty good. Jordan Love's back. He's healthy. He looks better. They put a beat down on the Cardinals. Vikings are still undefeated. The Bears are looking better. Caleb Williams is getting better. He is just, it didn't look great the first few weeks, but yes, he was the number 1 pick. Yes, he's the best player in college. Yes, it looked like it was going to be an easy transition, but he still was playing his first games in the NFL. And the Bears overall have done exactly what they needed to do. They're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. They're 4-2. They're in a situation to talk playoffs, which is that was kind of the goal for the Bears this year, being that playoff talk. And then you get to the end of the year, if you can get a win or 2, get in the playoffs. I think the question now is, I don't think it is a question. The NFC North is one of the best divisions in football. And then which team is going to finish last? And is there any way all 4 of those teams could get in the playoffs? There's a way. I mean, mathematically, there actually is a way, but the odds are not good. But who's going to finish last in that division?
I don't know. We talked before the season. I told you I think this division is maybe a year away from being the best division in football, depending on if Caleb Williams hits. I didn't expect Sam Darnold to be this good. Well, they already are the best division this year. The division's on a historic pace already to be one of the best divisions in the history of the NFL. So who finishes last? I don't know. Can all 4 get in? Yes. But the problem is they're going to start playing each other more. They're going to start beating up on each other. You look at the NFC West, maybe the Niners only come out of that one. The NFC East, hopefully it's only Washington that comes out of that.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's the NFC South. If the NFC South gets 2 in, then obviously the NFC North can only get 3. But who finishes last? I don't know. It's tough. I mean, the Lions were my pick to go to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. You wonder
they look good.
The Vikings, I think, are so far ahead of schedule. I don't think they would finish last, but you wonder if they're going to come back down to earth a little bit, start to reel in. The Bears, people have been saying they haven't really been beating any good teams, which is true, but they are getting better. So I have no idea who's going to finish last in that division. Jordan Love looked a little bit rusty out that injury, but now he's looking better. This division, the last 2 weeks of the season could be a lot of fun. I mean, there could be a lot of movement from 1st to 4th those last 2 or 3 weeks of the regular season.
It's all about the quarterback in the NFL. Goff is really good. Jordan Love has proven he's pretty good. How much better he is this week than last week. He played last week, but he wasn't 100. He got more healthy this last week and played much better. Sam Darnold is playing the best of his career, and then Caleb Williams is just going to get better every week just because more experience. And every week he's learning something. And when you do have the talent and some good players around him, he's just only going to get better. Now, is he going to have a game coming up that he doesn't look very good? Absolutely. They're going to lose a game they're probably not supposed to lose. But when you have talent, they might go get the Vikings for their first loss coming up. I mean, who knows? I don't even know when they play for sure, but I think they're probably going to lose a game they're not supposed to, but they'll probably win a game they're not supposed to win either.
Yeah, that's typical NFL. I think the Lions and Vikings play this week. That's going to be a real test to see how the Lions come back after that big win in Dallas. They embarrassed them. I'll be interested to see if the Lions come out strong or if they come out flat. And then the same thing for the Vikings coming off a bye week. Do they come out ready to play? And does Sam Darnold ever come back down to earth? I have a gut feeling he might, but so far this season, he's playing really well.
And I want this kind of off topic a little bit and kind of going off on a tangent, but with a Sam Darnold, and yes, quarterbacks, Kevin O'Connell, he's really good offensive coach and quarterback coach, and it doesn't really matter. He can kind of plug and play. And the Vikings, just in general, some of their best seasons have been with backup quarterbacks, and not just with Kevin O'Connell, with coaches before. Some teams just can do it that way, and then you go to teams like the Jets and the Panthers that just have no, like, if you get drafted there, you have no chance. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter what happens. Just things go wrong. And Sam Darnold happened to go to both of those teams, and I think that's why people are so down on him. And then I think last year he learned a lot. When you sit in with Kyle Shanahan and learn that offense and learn why and how to read, I'm guessing he learned more last year as a backup to Brock Purdy, but just being in that organization and then listening to Kyle Shanahan every day and why he does things and, you know, all the checks and just how to be an NFL quarterback more than anything that he wasn't taught in previous organizations is allowing him to have success. And I think he's always obviously had this talent inside of him, but he wasn't even supposed to have it. If J.J. McCarthy doesn't get hurt, he's standing on the sidelines.
Yeah, when he got drafted to the Jets, Mark Schlereth brought it up. They tried to give him the Peyton Manning offense. There's only one guy in history that could run the Peyton Manning offense. It's Peyton Manning. Yeah. You can't be throwing that at a rookie. So, yeah, what he learned last year in San Francisco, what he's learning this year at Minnesota, it just goes to show you get the right coach and the right environment, a winning environment, which the Vikings are. We've talked about that a lot. They don't have the Super Bowl yet, but they're always pretty good. And you look at the Jets and the Panthers; those are just losing organizations. And let's get into two more things, at least in the NFL. Let's talk Jets first before Nick Sirianni. Let's talk the trade. Obviously, the Jets lose that game to the Bills. Mike Williams doesn't run the right route. I was chatting with some folks on the forum that night, and when I saw that interception at the end, which was a heck of a play, actually, I just typed to him. I said, well, Mike Williams' time is ticking. Aaron Rodgers ain't going to have that. He's not going to have someone make him look bad. And then Aaron Rodgers goes in the press conference, throws him under the bus. Yep. Then you start hearing, well, Mike Williams is on the trade block. Well,
yep.
Could have seen that coming from a mile away. If you make Aaron Rodgers look bad, he'll make sure to get rid of you. No interception has ever been his fault in his career, and he's not gonna hear otherwise. And then, of course, he comes out today and says, no, I just try to hold everybody accountable. Aaron Rodgers listens to the media more than probably any quarterback in history, which it's kind of weird. I agree with him on a lot of his off-the-field stuff, anti-government. You know, I actually agree with Aaron on that, but we'll save that for another time. I honestly think he has to be the worst on-the-field leader and teammate of any of the great quarterbacks throughout history.
Yeah, he's a weird duck. He thinks his own way. He goes his own path. And what's crazy to me is Alan Lazard from Urbandale, Iowa, lives in Bondurant, Iowa. He has a house there now. Obviously, he probably has other house too, but he has a house in Bondurant. Comes from a great family. Everything looks on the outside to be relatively normal. He has hitched his ride to Aaron Rodgers, and he's made one heck of a career, and he's tied for the lead in touchdowns in the NFL. And he figured it out. Sit by my guy and be his friend and don't make him mad, and he'll take you wherever you want to go.
Yeah, no, he will. I mean, that's Lazard's having a good season. I picked up on one of my fantasy teams, speaking to him. And, you know, there's a lot of the Jet fans that are real excited that they're bringing in Davante Adams. Is Davante Adams going to fix the fact that I think they're first or second in the NFL in penalties? I'm guessing not. Is Davante Adams going to fix the fact that they don't have a head coach? They have an interim. Right. Don't think he's going to fix that. Is Davante Adams going to fix the fact that Woody Johnson's the owner? Nope. So I'm not buying it. And Rodgers is going to start running out of excuses. Now we're starting to hear the Hassan Reddick deal might get done. I bet it is about to get done because Woody Johnson knows the season's on the line. So if they lose, I think it's either Sunday or Monday night they play at Pittsburgh. If they lose that game, don't be surprised if Hassan Reddick signed the next day.
Yeah.
This should have been done 3 months ago when they made the trade for the guy way previous of that even. You should have had this deal done a month before the season. Now they're panicking. Teams that panic, it usually doesn't pan out well. So no, this is what losing organizations do, and this is what a terrible leader at the quarterback position gets you in a position of. You don't see Tom Brady, Peyton, Eli Manning, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. They don't go in press conferences and throw their teammates under the bus. They don't do it. He's the only one. He's lucky he's talented as he is.
Yeah, he's got as much talent in the quarterback position as anybody's ever had.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's definitely a top 10 quarterback of all time. You could make an argument top 5, especially with that talent he has, but just when you put it all together, he's not there. Speaking of the Steelers playing the Jets, they're making the move to Russell after Justin Fields. Here's a stat for you. I heard this today again on, I think it was a Morning Rush. They were talking about this too. Quarterback A stats. I think it's 10 touchdowns. I'm wrong on this a little bit, but you'll get my point. Maybe 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Or quarterback B, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. Which quarterback do you want? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
I'm guessing Fields is the 10-1.
Yep, because he's got 5 passing and 5 rushing and then 1 interception. And Mahomes is the other one. He's got 5 picks already. And then Fields is going to get benched for Russell Wilson this week. And I've got people. I'm not a Fields fan. I didn't like it when the Bears drafted him. I don't think he's a very good quarterback. And people are giving me heck now. Oh, he's 4-2 with the Steelers or anything. If they thought he was good too, he wouldn't be getting benched for Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson isn't very good either. But Mike Tomlin, he isn't in it for the fame or anything. He's head coach. He's got a Super Bowl. He is the Steelers coach until he doesn't want to be anymore. He doesn't have to do anything. If he thinks Fields is the best guy, he's going to play Fields and Russell Wilson's going to sit.
Yeah, I mean they're 4-2 and Fields' stats look pretty good, but if you watch the Steelers, that offense it's borderline like watching the Hawkeyes.
Yeah.
And I think Mike Tomlin knows that's not going to get it done in the playoffs. They might make the playoffs, and regardless, Fields or Russell Wilson, they probably aren't going to be able to make a run with bad quarterback play like that. I thought it would have taken a little bit longer for Russell to see some time, given that he had the injury before the season, but I don't really know if it matters who plays quarterback for the Steelers. Even if they get in the playoffs, they might win an opening game because of their defense. But you go against Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, I'll bet on those guys.
Yeah, I agree. But I just would have thought if any team and any coach didn't have to put anybody in because of the optics of it, Mike Tomlin is that guy. Mm-hmm. Belichick was that guy until he's done, but Mike Tomlin doesn't have to do anything for the Steelers if he doesn't want to.
No,
he's earned that right. He will play who he thinks is going to win because he wants to win football games.
Yeah, no, he's all about winning. And speaking of Belichick, let's talk about his next team, the Philadelphia Eagles and Nick Sirianni. I told you before the season I thought Nick Sirianni was going to be done. Yep. Him yelling at the fans, that's the dagger for him. I don't care if they make a playoff.
So bad.
He's gone. He's a clown. He's not going to be there. Howie Roseman, the GM, and Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, they're not going to put up with that. He reminded me of the movie Happy Gilmore when he first gets on tour. Yep. He's running around yelling at the camera and cussing, and the PGA commissioner's like, we can't have this. I'd have to imagine those two, whether they saw it in real time or later that night when they got back to their office and saw it on all the sports shows, they had to be shaking their head. They told him before the season, you couldn't be doing this. Then he goes out and does it. Then he brings his kids to the press conference. He knows he's in trouble. Comes out the next day, he has to apologize because he got scolded by those guys that night or the next day. And it's just a bad look. You can't do that to your fans. Those are the customers, first of all. And then also what it does, don't be surprised, because I don't think the Eagles are that good this year, whether they're at home or on the road, and they lose a tough game or they're getting blown out and the fans start yelling at the players on the bench. Maybe somebody throws something at one of the players, and all of a sudden you got the players turning around. Maybe you got a player going up into the stands. We saw that in 2020 during the COVID year. I think it was the Dolphins or the Jaguars had an incident that came up. Don't be surprised if something like that happens because of this behavior. That's what it's going to lead to. So Nick Sirianni's done. He can get them to the playoffs. I think even if he wins one playoff game, I think they're getting rid of him, and Belichick's coming in next year to be the head coach.
Who does Belichick bring in as his coordinators?
Oh, he'll bring in Josh McDaniels, the OC.
Oh.
And then for defensive coordinator, I don't know who you'd bring in. Maybe it would depend who'd be available.
Oh.
Maybe he'd probably bring in.
Is Josh working right now or no?
I don't know if he is. Obviously, he got let go by the Raiders last year. I haven't kept up with him. I don't know if he's actually coaching anywhere, but I would be willing to bet just about everything I own. If Bill does take the job, Josh is coming with him to be the OC.
Yeah, and I don't blame him. He's kind of hitched his. He's been a head coach a couple different times, and it's not worked out. But it's always been pretty good when he's been the offensive coordinator for the Patriots.
Yeah, so I mean, Bill Belichick to the Eagles. I'd put some money on it right now. I don't know if you can on DraftKings or any of these other FanDuel sites, but yeah, Nick Sirianni's gone.
Belichick is better, and he's got a little dry sense of humor to him on those commercials he's on, and then on the Manning cast and on different TV shows and spots that he's on. He's pretty good. I like him.
Mm-hmm. He's definitely getting people to think differently about him, more positive than before. Right. He's doing all the shows, going on McAfee, the commercials that you talked about. He's making himself a lot more likable, and then he's bragged up Howie Roseman 2 or 3 times throughout before the season and during the season, who's the Eagles GM. So he's kind of buttering him up. I think he's letting Howie know, hey, if this thing goes sideways, which it kind of is, take their record out of it.
I'm available.
So the Dallas job could be available too. There's some other ones, but I think Bill would like to stay on the East Coast, and Philly would be an ideal position, I think, because they've got all the offensive players, and Bill has struggled with offense later in his career. They need help on the defense, getting their quarterback, which would be Josh McDaniels' job, to get him back under control, less turnovers, and then Bill can focus on the defense.
Right. Yeah, he can turn the offense over to Josh,
mm-hmm.
and he can say, hey, you've got this talent. We can do it. Let's go.
Yeah. I think it'd be a really good fit.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else? We went a little bit long tonight, but that's okay. It's kind of a celebration of the Cyclones a little bit here. And for all Cyclone fans out there, celebrate it, enjoy it. It's not always been like this. We've been through, very leaner times. Enjoy it when it's good and celebrate it. Have a drink, have a cocktail, go out to eat, wear your Cyclone gear, enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely fun times for the Cyclones as a whole, as a university, for all these different sports programs. So hopefully Iowa State keeps it going this Saturday, and the Hawkeyes as well.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Trev, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Have a good night.